Hello, and welcome back to another episode. I'm up bright and early, sat at my desk this morning because I have a burning question that's been bothering me increasingly over the past couple of days, and certainly it's been simmering for the past decade or so, and that's to do with Y-axis inversion for first-person camera controls in computer games. Yeah, it's not the most pressing issue facing humanity right now, but it is one that matters to me because I've always had a preference for my Y-axis. And what this boils down to is that most people these days, when they're playing a first-person shooter, for example, or a game that's in first person, as is typical, the camera is mapped to the right stick, and if you push up on that stick, then the camera moves up. Your perspective goes up. If you push down on the stick, your perspective goes down. And that seemingly is accepted as the norm these days, and it's become the norm. I would say it's after years of experimentation, it has become the standard. But there are quite a few people, myself included, who prefer the other direction. So if you push down on the stick, then your perspective moves up. If you push up on the stick, your perspective moves down. And for some people that seems completely counterintuitive. On the Discord, I've had people say it's sacrilegious. And often when I'm streaming on Twitch, one of the first things I have to do is go into the options and invert the Y-axis. And I need to invert the camera. Yeah. And it seems that I'm not alone in having this as a preference, but also as well, it turns out that actually there are people who are specifically studying this, and seemingly last year came to some conclusions. I'm going to share those conclusions and link to them in the video description below. But I think today I want to focus on some of the conversation that surrounded this study and a couple of articles that I've come across, starting with this one in The Guardian from 2020. This was written in February 2020 by Keith Stewart. When up means down. Why do so many video game players invert their controls? This is a genuinely fraught topic. Is it generational? Is it habitual? Or explained by neuroscience? I asked the experts, he writes. It is an article that's behind a registration wall. Not a paywall, to be fair, but a registration wall. But it did generate a lot of conversation, 577 comments. And those comments, that debate actually inspired a follow-up article. So later that year in December, Keith wrote, "There's a gaping hole in our knowledge. The scientists studying why gamers invert their controls." And indeed, because of his article, Dr. Jennifer Corbett of Brunel University, now of MIT notably, but Brunel at the time, had been inspired by the ensuing debate. She and colleague Dr. Jaap Munnik have begun at that time an exploratory study looking into the science behind controller inversion. They have backgrounds in vision science and cognitive neuroscience, and both of them have employed a variety of research methods, from neuroimaging to computational modeling to psychophysics in their previous work. Now, with the help of 7 psychology students, they'll be running remote behavioral and psychophysical experiments using volunteer gamers aged between 18 and 35. And this at the time generated an awful lot of excitement. So this is December 2020, and at the time you see in various games journalism outlets people quoting that exact quote again. There's a gaping hole in our knowledge, scientists studying why gamers invert their controls, new study to solve gaming's biggest controller argument. And eventually the study was published. It was published via the Visual Perception and Attention Lab. And speaking of perception and attention, look at that for a campus with the wibbly wobbly well, what looks a bit like, it's a sculpture, but it looks like a climbing frame to me. And the buildings, it's fantastic. So this is at MIT, I believe, and the paper was published, Y-axis inversion in gaming, available as a PDF to download and read. It's a preprint article in that sense. So that systematic investigation did take place, and there was lots of excitement about it, because it is such a passionate conversation between people who care about it. But while I was looking at this, I came across this article. This is by a journalist at GamesBeat, Jeff Grubb. And he, in December 2020, so again, around about the same time when all of this was kicking off, wrote this. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this, because I can empathize with it. Or at least I could. Yeah. Opinion, he says. Why I invert the camera controls in video games. Empathy. Science is finally studying the beautiful minds of inverted gamers. Dr. Jennifer Corbett is the co-head of Brunel University's Visual Perception and Attention Lab in London, and she's planning to study people who invert the Y or X axis when controlling a camera in a video game, according to a report in The Guardian. Her team wants to understand why some people want the camera to look up when they press down on the joystick. But I already know why I do this, he says. It's about how I empathize with the characters and the world in a game. Yeah. Okay, it's not exactly true to say that Corbett and her researchers want to understand why people invert their controls. Instead, the study is more about determining how different people process visual information. And learning more about this topic can have far-reaching consequences. As she says, understanding these sorts of individual differences can help us better predict where to place important information, where to double-check for easily missed information in everything from VR gaming to safety-critical tasks like detecting weapons in baggage scans or tumours in x-rays, Corbett told The Guardian. But the author of this article wants to get into the why, because he thinks it's something that we gloss over when we argue about inverted controls. People often explain why it makes sense to them, but we don't get into the underlying philosophy that makes us choose the inverted in the first place. And this is the thing. This is what I've always felt about inverted controls, and I don't think it's just because I grew up on them. I think it's because they made sense to me, and it's because of what he's about to talk about here. He says here, and for me this comes down to the idea of understanding the connection between myself and the on-screen action. When you play Super Mario 64, you're actually controlling two characters. When Nintendo launched Super Mario 64 in 1996, the game inverted the camera controls for both the X and the Y axis. That might sound wild now, but Nintendo's reasoning made sense to me then. And it's the biggest reason I'm still inverted today. Now, interestingly, I'm typically inverted in the Y axis, not the X axis. It's a very personal thing, I think. But for him, it's both. The reality of a third-person game is that you're controlling two different characters at once, he says. And Super Mario 64 visualizes that with Mario, the main character, and Lakitu, the floating cloud creature who serves as Mario's camera person. If you think about the camera as controlling a separate camera person, inverted controls make a lot more sense, he says. You press up to levitate the camera higher, which will aim the perspective down by keeping the subject at the center of the frame. To look left, you need to strafe Lakitu around Mario to the right. Inverted X has faded over the years. Yeah, that's true. Hence, I think I only tend to invert Y. But that's because most games don't use Mario 64's free camera. A game like 2018's God of War attaches the viewfinder right to Kratos' back, and you're not really supposed to think about the camera at all. Instead, when you want to look left or right, you need to move Kratos physically left or right to do so. But even in this situation, inverted Y still makes the most sense. If you want to look up, Kratos isn't going to begin hovering. Instead, you need to tilt the camera back by pulling down on the stick to shift the perspective toward the sky. First-person shooters are similar. says the author. I invert the y-axis on a controller because I'm pulling down on the stick, matches up with the tilting of the character's neck back to look up. But I don't invert X because pushing right is about rotating the character's entire body to the right. And I think I've been there with him for so long. Back, up, right. Yeah. Although I've always wondered why I don't tend to invert both, because if you've got that logic, that's almost aeroplane control logic. You pull back on the stick to pull up to fly up. I suppose actually you roll right to roll right. Actually, yeah, okay. Inverting is about considering our connections to games, he says. But the above is just a quick list of explanations for why inverting the camera makes sense to me in certain circumstances. Other people will have other metaphors that work for them. For example, I did with the plane controls. But however you visualize it, the point is that inverted players are thinking about the mechanisms and levers that move a character through the world. We're considering why actions have a certain effect. To me, this comes down to empathy, he writes. I'm not the character. I am not the character, he says, on screen or the camera, but I am controlling them, and I want to be thoughtful about how I am interacting with them. And this creates a more direct connection to these in-game objects. So when I'm controlling them, I'm not sending them commands. Instead, we are linked together, acting as one unit. I suspect people who use direct style controls don't think about this as much. When they want to look up, they just they want the screen to move up, so they hit the up button and tell the screen to do that. And while I can't play games that way, I'm not judging anyone who does. Neither do I. Neither am I. You're actually holding a controller to interact with a video image on screen. As an inverted control player, I need to build that link with the on-screen action, because the camera person or character and me are all in this together. And that's always been the way that I have felt about using the camera in a computer game. It's been that sort of sense of like Super Mario 64. It's almost like you are following this person that you're working with and going through an experience together. And so it's always, it's made sense to me, move the camera up to have the perspective looking down. But clearly that's not the standard. And that shifting standard, those changing times, I think, began in part with console games at the beginnings of the 2000s. So late 90s, early 2000s. So here we have the beginning of Halo, where there is a very important and what became a sort of standard for a while moment of in-world calibration.
Sir? Right. Let's thaw him out. Okay. Bringing low-level systems online. Cracking the case in 30 seconds.
Now, to me, this also feels very much like the opening of Half-Life in some respects.
Blowing the pins in 5.
And you're about to see this interaction between someone in the control room and your orientation in 3D space, which happens in the lab space.
Sorry for the quick thaw, Master Chief.
In Half-Life.
Things are a little hectic right now. The disorientation should pass quickly.
Welcome back, sir. We'll have you battle-ready stat.
So, push the sample into the machine.
Please look around the room. I need to get a calibration reading for your battlesuit's diagnostics. Good. Thank you, sir.
I'm bringing your health monitors online, sir.
So this not only helps with immersion, this idea that the screen is the helmet view, and this is something that I've loved.
Vital signs look normal. No freezer burn.
In particular,
okay, sir. Go ahead and climb out of the cryotube.
In the context of Metroid Prime, for example, the visor effects in that game are wonderful. But also, you get this sort of battle
I gave you a
suit
double
calibration.
dose of the wake-up stim. Take a quick walk around the cryo bay and join me at the optical diagnostic station when you're ready.
Optical diagnostic station. And instead of having to press pause, go into game options, find camera view, invert the y-axis, they do
I know
this.
the ordnance techs usually take care of your targeting sensors, but we're short of time, Chief. Just look at each of the flashing panels to target them. When you lock on, it'll change color. Okay, that looks good.
Sir, I'm getting some calibration errors. I'm going to invert your looking pitch, so you can see if you'd like it better that way.
Isn't that cool?
Try targeting the flashing lights again. Is that better, or should I switch it back?
Oh.
Okay, try looking up and down again, please.
Which way did they
You want me to
go?
leave it like that, or switch it again? Okay, I'll leave the pitch normal, but if you want, you can change it yourself later.
So there you go. They have a whole section of right at the beginning of the game, setting up Master Chief's perspective and your control scheme as an in-universe acceptance that people perhaps had been experiencing the earlier days of 3D gaming, Mario 64, GoldenEye 64 for goodness sake. That had default invert, certainly on the aiming when you, I think, press the R shoulder button, you got the little red target that had inverted aiming on that really tall Nintendo 64 stick. So they understood that, and they're helping people to choose in the game how they want to play, and this works wonderfully well when you've got a Master Chief type character and he's in a battle suit that needs calibration. And I remember this very fondly. I remember that there was various instances of this sort of thing in different, especially FPSs at the time. They didn't take it for granted. They didn't know what people would want, so they let you choose. But interestingly, very recently, I found myself playing two games that just immediately feel correct in non-inverted y-axis. So here we are in Monster Hunter Rise, and this game I only started playing recently. I've played about 7 hours on and off, done a couple of level 2 quests so far, and I'm very much enjoying it. This is my first proper Monster Hunter experience, and even then, before that, my main experience had actually been in the demo of this game on Nintendo Switch. But here I am, controlling the camera quite naturally with non-inverted controls. It just, for some reason, feels correct for this game. I actually, initially, when I set up the game, I actually started by doing the old ritual of setting up the inverted control scheme, and very, very quickly I was like, no, this isn't right. And in moments of stress, that's always the tester, is what do you do if something's running at you and you need to quickly get the camera to look at them. I found myself running along and sort of going, oh no, I'm looking at the sky or the ceiling, I'm looking at the ground. I was confused in terms of the camera control scheme. Whereas in this game, the least confusing thing to do, therefore, was up is up, down is down. And that doesn't happen very often for me. There is one other instance of it happening, and that might be because it just happened to me with this game, and that is Sniper Elite Resistance. This is a new game from Rebellion, and the follow-up to Sniper Elite 5, which I've been very much enjoying. I for some reason, have really connected with this campaign and this character. But again, I found myself, in moments of stress, looking up, or moving up to look up, moving the stick down to look down. And this, I'll be honest, has freaked me out. It's been a bit of an axis crisis for me, because I just don't know what's going on with my brain. I went back and played No Man's Sky on Switch and found myself in that game, that save file in that game build, where the camera is inverted, the y-axis is inverted, I found myself confused. I found myself pressing up to look up, pressing down to look down. And it's got me wondering, have I reprogrammed my brain? Have I rewired some synapses or something somewhere? Does it now make more sense to me to press up to look up and press down to look down? Have I lost my empathy, as that article would have it, with gaming? I don't think so. I think it's definitely about comfort. The main reason why we make these choices in these games is to do with comfort. But why now? And it's interesting to me. So perhaps this is a case by case basis. Perhaps I don't actually have a preference, despite certainly having an opinion for years now on the y-axis, and that sense of again, the word is empathy, that sense of the fact that you feel as though you're controlling the perspective of a camera that's keeping a subject in the center of the frame. It's always made sense to me, and I think it's rooted in being an N64 boy, as it were, growing up on Mario, GoldenEye, Pilot Wings 64, for example. All of these games introduced me to 3D space proper and trained me to have that version of a third-person perspective. And actually, I would say it is a true third-person perspective, because again, you are moving as though you are watching the person, except obviously, again, as the article said, in the x-axis that did fade away over time. But now I don't know what I am anymore. I just thought it was worthwhile talking about today. Yeah, this y-axis crisis. What do you think about the y-axis? As I say on the Discord, in the past I've been called a complete heretic for thinking that y-axis inverted is the way to play, but I find myself now playing both teams, switching on both sides. I'm a double agent for the y-axis, and as my lovely wife was saying this morning, maybe that's fine. You know, maybe just play the game the way it feels right. But for so long, it's been such a big thing for me, and I haven't felt comfortable playing almost any game without switching the y-axis. But I'm going to have to go back now and try some others. If No Man's Sky has switched in my head, maybe if I go back and play Resident Evil 2, for example, will that be non-inverted for me? Blimey. Anyway, these are big questions, and I figured it was worthwhile just exploring where I'm at, because it's one of those fundamental conversations in gaming, I think, for an awful lot of people. And passions are high, and today my confusion is equally high. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I'll see you soon, and if not sooner, in fact, if you want to follow me on Twitch, if you want to see me experimenting with my y-axis live, as it were, do feel free to follow me over there on Twitch. But until next time, do take care. Bye bye.